can see here it looks rather complicated. There's lots of buttons, lots of menus, etc. But it's not that bad when you get used to it. So let's first of all insert a USB flash drive into my system. This is a 512 megabyte flash drive, Lexar Firefly, and you can see it's come up. It's a removable drive, so it's not a fixed disk, so it's a removable disk, and it's 512 megabytes. So the first thing to check is that you have the correct drive highlighted in this drive selection box here. If you've got more than one flash drive, then you're obviously going to get them listed here, so make sure you pick the right one. So now we've got some more options down here, and you'll notice actually the numbered 1 to 5 with number 6 being prepared drive. So you just fill them in order. So the first one is your partition size in megabytes, so we'll leave that as max, which obviously means maximum size, and you've got the helpful tooltips that give you a little bit of a clue. You've also got some help down here in this window, so if you watch, as you hover over each item, you get some help there. And I should have mentioned you can change the language as well here, so if you want Chinese, for instance, you get Chinese help. Not everything is in Chinese, unfortunately, or in Spanish or French or German, because it's not all translated, but most of it is. If you'd like to volunteer to translate any of this, it's just an ini file which you can easily add text to, and send me the ini file and I'll add it in. Anyway, to get back to the RMPrepUSB, so the first option is your partition size. The second option is the label volume, the volume label of the USB flash drive, which can be anything you like, but keep it down to 11 characters just for compatibility. You have to forgive my voice, I'm afraid. I've got a bit of a cold at the moment. Not the best time to make a video, I know. Number 3 is the bootloader options. Now, this depends on what you want the USB flash drive to boot to. So, if, for instance, you put a Windows 7 install ISO, if you unpack the ISO file and are going to put it on this USB flash drive because you want to install Windows 7, then you can choose this option and it will try to load the boot manager bootloader. If you're going to put an MS-DOS file system onto this drive, you obviously want it to boot to io.sys, so you'd use that option. This option will put the XP or BARTBE bootloader onto the USB flash drive, which will try to find the file NTLDR in the root of the system. This option will format the drive as an MS-DOS compatible drive, but then after that it will run syslinux to install the syslinux bootloader. And this last option, which I skipped over because it comes up with this prompt, is if you want to boot to FreeDOS, which for this demo will do. So RMPrepUSB actually comes with a set of FreeDOS boot files, and it will automatically, if you select that option, it will automatically ask you if you want to actually use those boot files. So in this case we say we do, so we'll say yes, and you see down here it's set the copy folder to be the file under RMPrepUSB called FreeDOS USB boot. So that's actually a folder, and in that folder will be the FreeDOS files. So the next option we got, number 4, is file system and overrides. You've got FAT16, FAT32 or NTFS. Now if you select WinPE or XP, you'll get NTFS options there. If you select FreeDOS, then you won't, because it doesn't support booting from an NTFS file system. You can use FAT16 on small drives up to 2 gigabytes, or FAT32 up to, well, any size really, up to 2 terabytes I believe. You'll notice that on the overrides we have a number of options here. I won't go into details on everything, but basically just choose boot as HDD, which actually puts us 2 partitions on the drive. The main partition, which is the maximum size or almost maximum size, and then a very small hidden partition, and that hidden partition has been shown to help the flash drive to boot on some systems which have BIOSes which treat a flash drive as a floppy drive or a zip drive unless you put this extra partition on. If it sees 2 partitions on a drive, it thinks, oh, this is a hard disk, I'll boot it as a hard disk. And so it doesn't hurt to put this override on whenever you are booting from a USB drive. If you choose FAT16, you'll notice that it also ticks this option by default, and that's usually because you're going to boot from a DOS drive. However, not all DOS drives like this option, so if I were you, I would try it without that option first if you have to use FAT16. If that doesn't work, then tick the option and try reformat it and try it again. Force use of LBA calls is another possible thing you can try if you have difficulty booting without the options. For now, I'll use the bog standard setting, which is this one, which I use on nearly all drives that I format. And the last option is copy OS files after format. So this has automatically been set for me to the folder which contains the FreeDOS boot files. I can show you that folder. If we go up here to the tabs at the top, you can see we've got Explore RMPrepUSB installation folder F3. So if you tap F3, you'll see it comes up with the RMPrepUSB installation folder, and there's a folder in there called FreeDOS, and those are the files that it will copy onto the USB drive after it's been formatted. So we're ready to go now. You can see there's a couple of other options here I'll explain. Set the partition as non-bootable. Obviously we want the USB drive to be bootable, so we'll leave that alone. Okay, and the last option is no user prompts. If you tick that, you'll only get usually 1 prompt to start the operation and no other prompts at all. If you untick it, then you'll get asked lots of questions just to make sure that you actually are choosing the right flash drive and the right choices. I'll leave it unticked for now, and you can see what happens. So let's go and format this 512 megabyte flash drive. I'll click on Prepare Drive, and straight away it asks us if we want to format it, and it tells us it's drive 2 and it's the Lexar JD Firefly, which is correct, so I'll say OK. Now I need to move the windows across quickly now so you can see it. So it's come up again with another warning. This one is from RMPrepUSB, which is called by RMPrepUSB. RMPrepUSB is a command line utility which actually does the formatting of the flash drive. So if I say OK, I'll drag the window across quickly so you can see it. So here it is. RMPrepUSB is formatting the flash drive. That's the command it uses to send to RMPrepUSB. And here it's copied across the files. I don't know if you saw that flash up then. Copy complete. So if I wanted to go and test this now, I would just click on eject drive and I could go and test it. However, we can do better than that. We can test it with the Q emulator button. But I'll just quickly show you what happens if you click on the no user prompts button, and I'll repeat that format again. So we still get the first question, but then it just quickly formats the drive without asking any more questions. And copies across the files. And that's it. The status down here, copy complete. Okay, so let's just test that USB flash drive using QEMU, which is an emulator. So it's just as if we were booting from the USB flash drive on a real system, except we can do it with this emulator under Windows. So I'll just click on this button, and the first thing it does is ask us a question: create and use a virtual hard disk. So with QEMU, because we're going to boot a virtual system, that system will usually have a hard disk in it as well as the USB flash drive that we're going to use. We want to boot from the USB flash drive, but we might, for instance, want to install an operating system onto the virtual hard disk that's in that virtual system. And if we do, we can create a virtual hard disk. So at the moment I've got a 64 megabyte virtual hard disk. It's very small, so I just use one there. If you wanted to change the size or have a bigger size, then you can type it in there. So if I wanted a 2 gigabyte hard disk, I could type it in there, but be warned that that will reformat the virtual hard disk into a new 2 gigabyte empty virtual hard disk, and you would lose whatever I had there on my 64 megabyte hard disk. So I'll just change that to 1 so it uses the virtual hard disk. And then the second question is the amount of RAM to make available to QEMU, the virtual system. So I've got 2 gigabytes free at the moment, and RMPrepUSB has chosen 1000 megabytes to use. For our purposes in FreeDOS, it doesn't matter what you use, so I'll change that to 50, but I could leave it at 1000. It really wouldn't matter. Click on OK. Now it's running QEMU, which is done over in this window. And there we are. So this is the QEMU session. You can see it's set the RAM to 50 megabytes, and the virtual HDD is called harddisk.image or harddisk.img. And you can see here the BIOS is signed on. It's a C BIOS, which is used by QEMU, so it's a virtual BIOS in a virtual system. It's booting from the hard disk, and because RMPrepUSB has set up the USB drive to be a hard disk. So when QEMU boots, it will treat the USB drive as a hard disk. So any formatting you do, if you want to use QEMU in RMPrepUSB to boot the USB drive, you need to format it as a hard disk, otherwise it won't boot successfully in QEMU. It might on a real system, but it won't in QEMU. And you can see that FreeDOS has booted successfully. Okay, so we can see here that we've got 2 hard drives listed, drive C and D. The first one is my USB drive, 512 megabytes, or 478 in this case. And the second one is my virtual 64 megabyte hard disk drive, which QEMU has made. And you can see it's booted to DOS, so I'm drive C. So I booted as a hard disk. So my USB drive, I'll just do a directory here. That's my USB drive. The volume is FreeDOS, which is what I gave it here. And those are my files. And if I want to run a program, so I'm actually running DOS in this virtual machine. So if I want to run a program, like check PCI, which you can see is listed here, then it will run the program. And if I want to use the program properly and list all devices, for instance, it'll list the PCI devices available to me. Or if I want to list some mass storage devices, it'll tell me I've got an IDE mass storage device in this virtual system. Okay, so that's, I think, the end of the first section of this tutorial. It's a very, very simple method. You just set up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Click on 6. You don't have to use 5. You can untick that, and it won't copy any files. It will just format it and give you a clean USB drive. Click on 6, prepare drive, and away you go.